Hi, this is Possibilities. I'm Cecil Walker.
And I'm Adam Froer.
And today we're going to be talking about how to use times of uncertainty to your own benefit, how to come out of it feeling like you've gained something really valuable in situations that maybe might have seemed like they should have been more of an obstacle for you. How do we jump into a topic like that?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I would say is that the reason that we chose to kind of take up this topic is because oftentimes when we as therapists encounter people and they talk about things that have happened in their past, or they talk about maybe past traumas that have happened, or difficulty when they were growing up, or something like that. Oftentimes kind of an underlying presence there is this idea of uncertainty, right? My life was in flux, or I couldn't really depend on particular people, or I never knew what was going to happen, right? So there's kind of always this undertone of uncertainty, and the implication that oftentimes people bring with them is, because I have endured uncertainty before, that is having long-term impacts. That's impacting what's going on in my life now. Because that was the pattern then, I'm afraid that still is the case today, right? Or we encounter other clinicians who work from other therapeutic approaches, and they'll say, because of these things that happened to somebody at that time, they struggle now, or they're having difficulty overcoming issues that they had in the past. And again, oftentimes it kind of centers around that idea of uncertainty. And so one of the things that we want to really talk about is that perhaps uncertainty isn't actually a bad thing. Perhaps it could be something that we could use to our own benefit.
Yeah, and I think the thing to hinge on there, the thing that can swing us around into looking at how this can be something to your benefit is looking at how you see people in general. I think it requires changing from seeing people as being kind of these sponges of traumatic experiences, or sponges of bad situations around them, and how they're soaking up the negative effects of those things, rather than these rocks of resilience, I suppose. These they're not objects of trauma. They're these living, growing beings that are surviving the context that they're finding themselves in.
Yeah, I think that's such an important distinction, and the image that kind of goes through my mind, right, is rocks. This is going to be weird. You said rocks of resilience, but rocks in a stream, right? And a stream is this constant flowing pressure, this constant flowing like agitation, right? And we might think of that as like a bad thing, right? That it's constantly flowing, that I can never get out of this process. But one of the things that happens to rocks that are in a flowing river is that over time they become more and more smooth. They become almost more beautiful in some sense, right? All those rough edges get kind of rubbed off. And I think sometimes that's can be similar to what happens to us as we experience adversity. I think oftentimes this idea of uncertainty, right? Am I going to be able to depend on somebody? Am I going to be able to do that thing that I was hoping to do, right? Oftentimes when people experience kind of ongoing uncertainty, one of the things that happens is that they actually become, like you said, more resilient, right? They, instead of being crippled by uncertainty, they become motivated by, if something's going to happen, I'm the one who's going to need to make it happen. I'm the one who's going to have to be self-motivated in order to pursue something that I want. And I'm not saying that not depending on people is, satisfactory, or that that's a good thing. But I think that we can learn how strong we are, and that perhaps we don't need to wait for somebody else to make something happen. We can pursue something because we're not sure if anybody else will.
Exactly. Yeah, I think adverse situations call upon a certain version of yourself. And I think the struggle people can feel is maybe feeling like I don't know if I can handle this situation. I don't know when I will find the stability that makes me comfortable again in this situation. But it sounds like what you're describing, what we're turning to now is, who is the person that I have to be? Who's the version of myself I have to be to take on this situation? Or even who will I be coming out of this because of this situation?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is, and I think it'll be important to talk about it in two different ways, but one of the things that we talk about a lot after the fact is, what did you learn by going through that process that perhaps you couldn't have learned in any other way? What did you realize about yourself as you traversed that difficulty or that uncertainty that maybe you wouldn't have realized about yourself if things had been easy, or if there hadn't been a difficulty or challenge, right? And so I think oftentimes looking back, we may recognize that we developed strength, or we kind of grew attributes that are beneficial, that we're glad that we had. And I think keeping that in mind, if we're in the midst of it, then we actually have a lot of power to say, what kind of person do I want to be at the end of this, right? It's not just something that we can make sense of after the fact, but it's something that we can influence in the moment. And we can pause and we can say, okay, if I were to use this adversity to my advantage, if I were able to develop a skill that I really wanted to develop, or if I could persist through that, what would that mean about me, right? And so recognizing the uncertainty, I think, is really important, but deliberately and intentionally making meaning of it in the moment could actually help us fare far better than if we just let adversity happen. And if we consider ourselves like victims or passive consumers of whatever's going on.
Absolutely. You know this about me already, but I feel like I was in a place of what would look like a large amount of adversity when I was just starting out college. I had graduated high school. I just turned 17, but my mother, who was my only caregiver, she passed away from cancer. And so now I was kind of newly emancipated, while also grieving at the same time, and now having to take on this new phase of life where I was going into college and really being the only person in my family who had gone to college, the first of my siblings and my parents, so the first of our generation, really. And I don't know if I had been as conscious at the time, but I think if I had, that would have helped even more. But even still, not having to linger on the uncertainty, not having to say, where's this going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to make my way out of this? Instead, I guess the skill that kind of instantaneously instilled in me, and that I had to call upon at that time, was just taking one foot in front of the other, being able to accept the difficulty of moments that I was in and just start the hard work of putting one piece together after another. Where do I go from here? Here's what I have to do.
Can I ask you a couple questions? Because one of the things that I'm wondering is, like, in the moment, right? At a time where there was a lot of uncertainty around, like, what does this mean? And what am I going to do in life? And all of those kinds of things. How did you not let that become something that was debilitating, but instead have that become something, I guess, how did you do that? Put one step in front of the other?
I think I knew the future had to come, so I just wouldn't let myself delay in getting there. I definitely did not want to miss out on the first semester of college. I wasn't going to defer or anything like that. And I didn't want to see myself sinking and drowning, in all the things that this moment was now calling me to do. And so it was very, very clear to me that the future was coming, and it was happening now. My present right now was actually asking me to do things. And so I could either be stifled by the uncertainty and say, ruminate over what's to come and all the problems and questions that I would have to answer to, or I could just begin to do the work of what the moment was calling me to do.
So this might be a hard question, but if if we call something uncertainty or we call it debilitating, what is it? What do you call what you did? What is that called?
That is hard to answer. I think some component of it is resilience, maybe, but it's some type of stubborn acceptance, I guess, that like forces forward movement. There was no, for me at least, in my experience of that moment, there wasn't a disbelief of the reality that I was living in, and there wasn't a looking for another way around it or forfeiture of what I was living in. It was I guess how I described it was a stubborn acceptance of where I was and what I had to do, and so the only option was either to stop and not do that or just go forward.
And so then I guess the other question, kind of thinking about like the impact of that, right? As you look back now, years later, at that stubborn acceptance, what is the result now of doing that? Because I think let me put some context to that question. I think sometimes people might say, like, maybe you didn't grieve well enough, or maybe you ignored what was going on, or maybe you just pushed forward, but you didn't really heal. So what's the impact of that stubbornness that pushed you forward?
That perspective of maybe that is a deficiency in grieving, from what I experienced at the time, I think that would be a really hard sell to tell me that I didn't fully feel those things or fully grieve those things. And still, as grief can be an elongated process, still think I'm somewhere on whatever that journey is supposed to be. But I see that now as being a major part of my personality, maybe a major part of what I see as being some of my best strengths. I'm not stifled by things easily, whether that is something shocking or something spontaneous or something really, really difficult. I think the exact same thing now just instantly happens for me, where this is what I need to work with now. This is what I need to handle now. And I think that applies to clients that walk into my office and the problems that they might have. But it also that happens for things that happen in my personal life. If something difficult comes up, or if there's something that I need to manage, just now I have to do the work of managing that. And this isn't there's never a consideration of I might fall, or that who knows where this is going to go, or this problem this client has is too big. It's just, let's do the work now.
So here's my last question. And I think maybe a lot of people who've experienced, trauma or difficulty like you've experienced might have the question of, so how did you do it? Right? Like maybe something difficult is happening to me and I'm not doing that right now, or I feel completely overwhelmed by what's happening. And so I'm not putting one step in front of the other. So if you had to say to people, like, how do you do this? What would you say?
I guess essentially it's very similar to what our conversations as solution-focused clinicians do for people. That would kind of be what my advice there is to get in contact with the best version of yourself, the version of you that is capable of handling whatever situation this is. To instead of taking a look at all the uncertainty the future has, taking a look at what does it look like if you are juggling this in just the right way, if you are seeing yourself starting to move through this. And I think just in being in contact with that starts to move yourself to a place of, it can work. You can start to move some of these pieces around and look at how does this actually work out maybe.
Yeah, I think you said some really, really important things. And I think kind of the way that I would summarize kind of the end of that is uncertainty, challenges, difficulty. It's going to come to each of us in one way or another, right? And it can either be something that demotivates us, or it can be something that we can kind of take the reins and say, okay, I'm not going to let uncertainty kind of control this situation. And one of the big ways that we can kind of counter uncertainty, or even like use uncertainty to our advantage, is to say, what do I want the outcome to be? Instead of waiting for the outcome to come to me, I can say, how do I want to influence, because it's uncertain, potentially anything is possible. So how do I want to influence the outcome here? And I think that one of the other things I think that's really valuable in what you're saying is that once we've had one experience of successfully navigating an uncertain situation, the next time it comes up, we can look back and we can say, I've done this before. And instead of being traumatized or debilitated, we can be resilient and motivated. That one moment of success can then lead into another moment of success when the next inevitable uncertainty comes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, it's almost ironic, the way through it is kind of flipping the uncertainty on its head. I heard Elliot say recently that one of the ways to be successful is to kind of prepare yourself for the success, to kind of prepare to already celebrate the success that's to come. And I think part of that is kind of the ingredient to this, to handling a situation that causes so much uncertainty, is by kind of holding tight onto the certainty that, well, I'm going to be somewhere in the future. I'm going to move somewhere. I'm going to get through whatever this moment is presenting to me. And then I just need to start connecting the dots of, well, what parts of myself do I need to draw on to be able to get there? If I do get there to that place, what will I look back on and see myself having done? What do I need to even start to believe about myself, maybe, that would make this easier for me to start moving towards that? I think it requires that ingredient of, yes, there's uncertainty, but the thing I am certain about is that there will be a time and place that I am somewhere different.
Yeah, no, I think that's really beautiful. So I think, it's somewhat ironic that we're talking about uncertainty when the title of this is possibilities, right? And I think in some sense, with uncertainty comes many, many possibilities. And what version of us do we want to engage with those possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you start thinking in these kinds of ways, you can easily get very excited about those possibilities.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks for hanging in there with us. We're glad that you were here. We would love to hear your comments and feedback about the things that we've talked about, the possibilities of uncertainty. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to this so that you can be notified when the next one comes out, because we're going to be putting more and more of these together.
Absolutely.
Thanks.